It's just so unfair.
Huh?
How come we never get to decide anything?
You're deciding to have this conversation right now, while we're in public.
We make up the majority of the population in Athens, and yet those rich doo-doo heads get to decide everything for us. If they get into a fight, who goes to war? If they get stuck in the middle of it, who pays for the damages? We do, not them.
Yeah, I think you should keep it down a bit. You're starting to attract attention.
I'm just saying, it would be nice if we get a say in what happens in our own city, you know? I mean, it's our city too.
You make a good point, but that will never happen.
Oh, it'll happen. Trust me. Thank you, unnamed ancient Athenian. You do make a good point. Before the city became a pile of ruins for tourists to visit, ancient Greece used to be composed of several city-states. A city-state, or polis, was a sovereign city that had its own set of political, cultural, and economic policies over its territories. Each city-state had their vast differences, but held one thing in common. They were all ruled by aristocracies, at least at the beginning. Like our dear ancient Athenian explained, an aristocratic government is a government run by a select few from the elite, ruling classes. In layman's terms, aristocrats were wealthy, influential figures that had either come from wealth and probably never worked a day in their life, or fought their way to glory in the battlefield or through business. Either way, they had total power to decide what happened in the state. Obviously, we now know that this isn't the best way to rule, as we have come to value our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote, and our freedom to take part in legislation, among many others. But all of these freedoms had to come from somewhere, right? Many of the modern characteristics that make up Western civilization, from music to architecture, and yes, even our love for freedom, all had their roots in one particularly special city-state that attempted to break away from the aristocratic form of government and established a crude version of what we now know as democracy. That state being Athens. Chapter 1. Before Democracy. Not only is Athens the blueprint for the core values of Western civilization today, but it's also the birthplace of good old-fashioned democracy, which debuted around the 6th century BC. The etymology of democracy, or demo-kratia, combines both the elements of the people, or demos, and the elements of power, krátos, literally meaning people power, that was especially evident in Athens' direct democracy. But how did Athens come to create what we now consider to be one of the best ways to run a country? Even before the first attempts at establishing democracy, Athens was already economically prosperous in its own right. But like other Greek city-states at the time, from the 8th century to the 6th century BC, political power in Athens was held by wealthy aristocratic families. The public had virtually no control over what happened in the city, as this power was reserved for the select privileged few. To give a clearer picture of what an election in pre-democracy Athens was like, Aristotle notes, appointments to the supreme office of state went by birth and wealth, and they were held at first for life and afterwards for a term of 10 years. In other words, if you're broke and you're not born into a good family, you can kiss your wish of political representation goodbye. When the city-states were first established, Athens set up a monarchy where a king, or a basileus, essentially ruled everything along with his clique of nobles beneath him. But this didn't last too long. As these nobles grew richer and richer from the trade of wine and olive oil, they started to develop an even more powerful body called the Areopagus, which was a group of noblemen named after the hill where they would meet. This little clique eventually became to form the oligarchy, and after the monarchy failed in Athens, the aforementioned oligarchs started occupying the positions of archons, or chief magistrates. I am your king, here is some land, and go make money and pay me taxes in thanks. Thank you, sir. We'll be forever in your debt.
One eternity later.
Guys, we're so rich we don't need no king no more. Let's band together and overthrow him. Yeah! Come on, guys. I thought we were friends. Jerry, we watched the game together. Come on, dude. Guys, go! Although this old-timey oligarchy was not representative of the ordinary Athenian, it planted the seed for democracy. Archons could submit proposals for changes in policy and presented them to the entire Areopagus, which would approve or decline their rulings, something Athenian democracy would later mimic, but on a larger scale. Anyways, the rule of the oligarchy didn't fly as well with Athenians either. The rich flourished from trade, the ordinary farmers who made the trade possible suffered economically. Wheat production fell, and as the prices of crops plummeted, many farmers fell deeper and deeper into debt. To pay their debts off, many of them were forced to sell their children, their wives, and even themselves into slavery. The rich oligarchs remained healthy and free, and couldn't care less about what happened to the poor. And as the trend goes in history, when you starve your people, they get angry, and so was the case in pre-democracy Athens. The lower classes started showing great and arguably understandable disapproval towards the oligarchy, and the next few years were characterized by a period of strife between the aristocrats and the everyday Athenians. In an attempt to right the wrongs set by the previous government, in the middle of the 7th century BC, a series of more open-minded leaders ruled Athens, and they laid the groundwork for democracy. Chapter 2. Early Days of Athenian Democracy. Solon. In 594 BC, as tensions between the lower citizens and the rich landowners grew, the Athenians appointed a modestly wealthy guy named Solon as the archon to serve as a mediator and a lawgiver set to right the wrongs committed by the elites onto the poor landless owners. Unfortunately for Solon, he was put in the position during a time of severe economic crisis, and it had a lot to do with agricultural lands becoming overly concentrated in the hands of the rich. Citizens were forced to work as dependents or hectomoroi to the landowner class, to whom they paid 1/6 of their crops to, despite the glaring fact that they were never really had enough for themselves to begin with. Those who couldn't pay their debts were eventually forced to become slaves to the land-owning class, something that Solon was brought in to fix. His solution? Screw debt, just cancel them.
But sir, the rich people will be angry.
I don't give a turkey's gobble what the rich people think. Them poor people are suffering. His plan was referred to as the cis ekthea, meaning shaking off of burdens. In practice, the hectomoroi still had to pay off some debts, but now they were given the right to own the land they tilled, which was a great concept, but the land was never truly returned to the farmers after the government forgave their debts. Solon made it illegal to put a person up as collateral for a loan to prevent poor workers from falling into the slippery slope of slavery. During his time as archon, he built a new constitution and restructured the Athenian social class system. He created 4 distinct groups based on their agricultural production that determined their wealth, and thus their position in society and the privileges and rights available to them. The groups were named Pentakosio Medinoi, Hippis, Zugatai, and Thetes. This class structure gave certain political rights. For example, the Pentakosio Medimnoi and the Hippis could hold high political office, while the Zugatai were allowed to hold minor positions in government. Meanwhile, the Thetes, well, they could participate in the Athenian assembly and jury system, but they weren't allowed to hold an official position. In this restructuring of the class system, he laid down an important concept that we still somewhat echo today. Political participation was the citizens' duty and not just a privilege to be exercised when they wanted to. His decision to limit the powers of the richer landed elites, although they didn't do much to change the living conditions for the poor, and to ensure he didn't take too much power away from the elites, he created a council of 400 who set the agenda for the deliberations of the larger plebeian assembly. He later earned his reputation as one of Athenian's founding fathers who helped in sowing the seeds of democracy. During his time as archon, Solon freed Athenians who had been enslaved due to debt. He created laws that were nudged towards economic recovery, but didn't solve the city-state's big economic woes. Despite his efforts to create a more democratic society, Athenians from all classes still disapproved of his leadership because A, he took some of the power away from the richer, while B, not fully committing to his promise to total equality for the poor.
Solon sucks because he's taking away my rights. I'm a conservative and believe a man from a good family like mine has the gods given right to own other people if they were sold to me by their parents, and also that because I was born into a good family, I'm better than poor people. The gods made me better, and Solon shouldn't go against the gods.
Solon is all talk and no substance. He promised a lot, and sure, we can't be slaves anymore, but now what are we supposed to do if we run out of money? At least before we could sell ourselves and didn't have to worry about debts we couldn't pay.
and sadly his laws paved the way for tyrants to assume power after he put himself in voluntary exile. His reforms led to factional strife among Athenian families looking to take over as archon, and once again brought Athens to the brink of civil war. Chapter 3, the popular Tyrant Peisistratos. During this period of fractional strife, Athens' next notable ruler arose. Peisistratos was the head of a large aristocratic family in Athens, and his rise to power was, well, let's just say dramatic. The Solonian Reformation didn't eliminate the want of the aristocrats to seize the power of the archonship. Peisistratos himself had many unsuccessful attempts at seizing power before he finally took control. For instance, after proving himself in the Battle of Megaragara in 565 BC, he held the position of archon for a brief period before the tag team Lycurgus and Megacles, the heads of two other families that wanted to be archon, forced him out around 556 and 555. After some other attempts, however, Peisistratos finally succeeded in securing the seat in 546 BC, and he ruled until his death in 527, and was succeeded by two of his sons, Hippias and Hipparchos, with the reign of the three often referred to as the Peisistratid rule. Peisistratos was praised by Aristotle for running an administration that was moderate and more constitutional than tyrannic, and that he was kind and mild in everything. Peisistratos' administration of the state was, as he has been said, moderate and more constitutional than tyrannic. He was kindly and mild in everything, and in particular, he was merciful to offenders, and moreover, he advanced loans of money to the poor for their industries. He did have his shady side though. During his reign, he hired a group of mercenary bodyguards to protect him, and even took hostages from major families in the islands of Naxos just in case the aristocrats tried to take power. Many of the aristocrats were cooperative and were even allowed to hold a yearly post as archon while others were exiled. In short, he was unapologetically confrontational with the aristocrats, and his championing of the lower classes was one of the earliest examples of populism.
So, Mr. Ruler Man, what's the main focus of your administration?
I support the little guy and believe in helping the little people get better. Now, this next part is totally off the record, but if anyone disagrees with me, well, let's just say they get a free trip to the dungeon.
Well, I support you, sir.
Despite being a literal tyrant who technically took power by force, he still kept and preserved the constitutional form of government and went a step further by making the government operate more effectively. Most of Peisistratos' reforms as a master of Athens were religious in nature, with the intention of increasing the unity within Athens. Many local cults of Attica, the lands surrounding Athens, were brought into the city or had branches and shrines inside, like the shrine to Artemis located at the Acropolis. It was in Peisistratos' reign that Athena became the main deity revered by the Athenian citizens. He gave a glow up to the Panathenaea, an annual festival dedicated to Athena, where every 4 years he would host athletic contests and give prizes to bards who would recite Homeric epics. Peisistratos made major infrastructure upgrades by creating an aqueduct that helped sustain Athens' growing population with a steady source of clean water. He even worked to make the main marketplace more efficient and built temples to honor the gods. Like Solon, his main interests aside from religion and the arts were agriculture and commerce. He was proudly the champion of the poor and offered confiscated lands from the aristocrats to the poor, and even offered loans and equipment to farmers. By the later half of the 6th century, Athenian industry and commerce expanded under the Peisistratid rule thanks to Athenians' internal tranquility and Peisistratos' pursuit of peace externally. Yet even after all that pizzazz during his reign, things got really shaky after he died. After the successful murder attempt against his son Hipparchus, his other son Hippias grew increasingly paranoid and became oppressive towards the people of Athens. After 4 years of trying to drive him out, the rich family named Alcmaeonidae bribed the Delphic oracle to tell the Spartan king to liberate Athens, which they did in 508 BC, throwing Hippias into exile, putting an end to the Peisistratid rule and ushering in yet another period of political strife. Chapter 4, Cleisthenes and the onset of the Athenian democracy. Almost immediately, conflict broke out amongst the larger families. After the Achaemenid family's success, their leader, Cleisthenes, came in conflict with another aristocrat named Isagoras, who got the upper hand by convincing the Spartan king to banish Cleisthenes by saying he was cursed. But Isagoras' reign was short-lived because he started kicking out hundreds of other Athenians under the same pretext of them being cursed. As expected, people started to get pissed, so they cornered him and his supporters in the Acropolis, and they were promptly kicked out of Athens. Cleisthenes was brought back from exile and given power by the people, technically making him the first democratically elected leader in Athens and perhaps all of Western civilization. In his reign, Cleisthenes made the revolutionary realization that much of what held Athens back from experiencing Solon's full promise of equality in the eyes of the law was the class system that judged rights based on family you were born into and not your skills and ideas. He implemented reform that shattered the 4 traditional tribes into 10 tribes based on their area of residence, which later formed the basis of the new democratic power. Public rights and duties were now dependent on a deme or a town membership that kept a record of their citizens and elected their own set of officials. The Solonian Council of 400 was then increased to a council of 550 from each of the 10 tribes. Reformers referred to the Cleisthenes' changes as isonomio, or equality of rights for all. It led to a more active public participation and ensured representation for the common man. Although Cleisthenes himself didn't call it demo-kratia or democracy, his policies laid the framework for early democracy, a government run by the people for the people.
I'm creating a new government where everyone has the same ability to rise to power, and there's going to be multiple ruling bodies of people so that there are checks and balances of power so that no one person can take control and oppress others.
This new direct democracy was run by 3 vital institutions: the ecclesia, the bulle, and the dicasteria. The ecclesia, or assembly, was the sovereign governing body of Athens, where any member of the demos was welcome to participate in. And I feel like I gotta clarify something really important. Any free young adult male was encouraged to participate in the ecclesia. Meetings of the ecclesia were held 40 different times a year and held similar powers to the modern-day US Congress. They made decisions on war and foreign policy, wrote and revised laws, and even had the authority to approve or condemn public officials. Of course, doing all that in a room full of about 500 men was most likely a chore, so they all made their decisions by simple majority vote. Meanwhile, the bulle took charge of the day-to-day governance. They supervised daily tasks and took charge of managing the navy and army. Their primary function was to decide what matter would come before the ecclesia, which meant that the burden of determining what Athens' democratic leaders were going to discuss was up to them. The last institution in Athenian democracy was the dicasteria, or the popular court. Though the bulle dictated how the ecclesia was going to run, the dicasteria had almost unlimited power in deciding people's fate in the Athenian democracy. They had no formal court system at this time, so everyday people would decide justice amongst themselves. Regular citizens acted as the prosecution, the defense, the judge, and the jury. It was all overseen by the dicasteria. With the new structure and system in place, Athens started to look like a democracy. However, there's no escaping the fact that Athens was still in many ways traditional. Despite the promise of equality under the eyes of the law, only free men were allowed in the assembly, while women and slaves were still on the sidelines. I again stress the glaring fact that slavery still existed during this time. Not much is recorded about Cleisthenes after he made these reforms, but today he's credited as the founder of Athenian democracy. Chapter 5, the Athenian Legacy. In retrospect, Athens' road to democracy was pretty bumpy, and their newly developed democratic form of governance was unstable. The founding fathers of the United States thought the same. They studied both the democracy of Athens and the Republic of Rome, and arrived at the conclusion that the Athenian democracy was too unstable, as they were easily swayed by group passion rather than reason. Although the founding fathers favored republicanism over Athens' direct democracy, they still admired its achievements, and their ideals eventually shaped the way most governments run in the modern day. The involvement of the citizens in public policy, the right to speak out, the rights to vote on legislation, all of these had their roots in Athenian democracy.